Hello, I'm Don the Crown, and welcome to Swiss Army Champion. This build is an endgame mapper and bosser that absolutely annihilates endgame content. It can get started on a budget and has a nearly unlimited ceiling for gear investment. This is my update to my 3.2 Bestiary League guide, where I was able to get 4.2 million DPS with Blade Flurry. My goal this league was to refine the build without using the powerful Bestiary only items, and to open up gearing options with smarter choices in both gearing and passive tree selection. This league, I've managed to get 6 million DPS with worse weapons and better choices. But wait, there's more. I'm dubbing this the Swiss Army Champion because it has more than just 2 skills to work with. I've currently farmed endgame content and killed Uber Elder with 5 additional skills with very little alteration to the gear used. We'll get into that later. Let's start off with the build breakdown. In this build, we primarily use Reeve to clear maps and weaker bosses, and Blade Flurry to kill the hardest bosses. Typically you can get away with switching increased area effect out for concentrated effect with Reeve once you have enough damage. For our ascendancy, we're going Champion because Worthy Foe and First to Strike Last to Fall provide insane damage. For special gear, we're using Loreweave, Combs Roots, a Shaper stat stick, and a nice physical foil. Please note that none of these items are required to get started. Here are the skill gems that we'll be using for our primary attack in order of importance. And for bossing, you will be equipping these in your body armor with the extra gems in a weapon swap to quickly switch. Also, yes, hypothermia is really good, and yes, you can chill Elder and Shaper. I've done it with a white foil. For movement, I prefer Whirling Blades with Blood Magic to help mitigate any mana issues from moving around. You'll be equipping this in an open 4-link, either your gloves or helmet. For auras, we'll be using Hatred, Herald of Ash, and Blood Rage. You'll be equipping these in an open spot in a piece of armor. It's important to note that you don't want to place auras in your weapons, as weapon swappings remove the aura. Lastly, I recommend a 3-link cast when damage taken support, Immortal Call, Cold Snap, and then Ancestral Warchief and Leap Slam for getting around cliffs. Next, let's talk about gearing this build. This build utilizes a sword in the main hand and a scepter stat stick in the offhand. A stat stick is a weapon that is held but isn't used to attack directly. Normally they provide a significant damage boost from both the stats on the stick and the implicit benefits you receive from dual wielding, which are 10% more attack speed, 15% additional block chance, and 20% more physical attack damage. Since both Reeve and Blade Flurry cannot be used with scepters, but will still work as long as you have a sword, claw, or dagger equipped, we will be able to use a scepter as a stat stick and boost our damage significantly, while still qualifying for both one-handed and dual-wielding damage sources. Starting off, you can use a Skava and a Death's Hand for weapons. However, these are the 2 gear slots where investment will provide the most returns. Look for a one-handed thrusting sword with a high physical DPS, crit, and attack speed. Please note that both crit and attack speed affect the base stats of your weapon, which are then multiplied by all other sources. This makes it vital to have these rolls directly on the weapon. Also note that we are only scaling physical damage, so any elemental damage from your sword is generally wasted. For the base, I would recommend a plain jeweled foil. I personally craft most of my swords, and I will go into how to do this in another video. I've included a starter sword search in the details. For your stat stick, you should look for a Shaper Scepter that has 1 or more physical damage added as extra modifiers. The perfect stat stick would have Shaper prefixes, crit multi, physical damage added as a random element, and elemental penetration. As something like this could cost hundreds of exalts, I would recommend a Shaper Scepter with a decent amount of total physical added as extra mods. I've included a starter search in the details. Do note that most stat sticks will require a decent amount of intelligence, which we'll want to pick up from gear or the passive tree. For the base, I would recommend either a Sandbar or Void Scepter, but you can go with other ones if you want to dodge some of the intelligence requirement. For body armor, you can start off with a 5-link or tabula rasa, and once you're able to afford it, I would recommend getting a 6-link lore weave. For damage stats, the priority is flat physical damage, followed by crit, and then elemental damage. While having 80% all res is really nice, it's not mandatory. 77% or higher should be fine for most content. The next piece of gear I want to talk about is boots. For endgame mapping, and especially Uber Elder, nothing beats Comb's Roots. The line, "You cannot be slowed below base speed," makes you immune to things such as temporal chains, freeze, and Elder's super slow. This is a major quality of life buff for mapping and nearly mandatory for Uber Elder. That said, if you're not planning on farming Elder, then you can likely use rare boots. I would prioritize life and resistances while completely ignoring movement speed. Since we're going to have immense attack speed for Whirling Blades, you'll generally be using that skill to travel around and barely walk anywhere. Since we'll need intelligence for a stat stick, this can be a decent spot to find some, since boots don't have any damage stats to worry about. For our helmet, look for similar stats as boots: high life, resistances, and maybe some intelligence. If you're looking for helmet enchants, the ones you're looking for are Blade Flurry damage, Blood Rage grants additional attack speed, and Ancestral Warchief grants increased melee damage, in that order. Note that these enchantments only provide marginal gains, and having a solid stat helmet is the #1 priority here. For gloves, you'll want life, attack speed, and a resistance or two. Spike gloves are the best base for our purpose. Don't lab enchant them, but starting off, any glove will do. A good attack speed roll is worth a lot more damage than adds physical damage to attacks, so keep that in mind. Incursion League has also added some additional modifiers on gloves that can add a lot of damage. Keep an eye out for gloves with increased damage with hits against chilled enemies. Since we'll be chilling enemies, this can be a sizable damage boost for us. The best belt for mapping is hands down Headhunter, but for bossing or budget, a good Stygian Vice with life, resistances, and elemental damage with attacks will get the job done. Cyclopean Coil is another good option. Amulets and rings are a little different than the other rare items we've covered so far. These slots can range from defensive bulwarks with high resistances and life to massive damage boosters with additional physical damage added as mods, crit multi, attack speed, flat physical damage, or elemental damage with attacks. What you choose to use on your character will vary depending on your budget and resistance and stat requirements. Whatever you decide to do in these slots, I highly recommend that you use items that have life on them. For flasks, I personally use the following: Panicked Life Flask of Staunching, Silver Flask, Diamond Flask, Lion's Roar, and Adziri's Promise. I recommend having at least one Warding Flask and one Grounding Flask. If you're not using Comb's Roots, you'll also need a Flask of Heat. Only on Uber Elder will I switch out the Silver Flask for an additional Life Flask. Lastly, let's talk about jewels. I like to break down jewel mods into 3 categories: useful, damage, and GG damage. Useful mods includes things such as life, resistances, leech, or intelligence. Damage mods include damage, physical damage, critical strike chance, and attack speed. The GG mods for this build are any critical multi-source and attack speed with swords. Next, let's review the passive tree. I've chosen a somewhat tanky passive tree with a lot of damage. I focus on getting life on my way to the melee crit wheel and heading up into shadow for more crit nodes and intelligence. I also pick up easy to get jewel nodes. This tree could be adjusted towards more life nodes for increased survivability, or to go even more glass cannon by trading some life nodes for more damage or jewel sockets. This tree is a little different from last season because we head up into the shadow portion for more damage and more intelligence. This helps us loosen our stat requirements on gear a little bit. For ascendancy points, I took Conqueror and then Worthy Foe, followed up by First to Strike, Last to Fall, and finally Unstoppable Hero. For bandits, you'll want to help out Alira for the additional crit multi and resistances. Let's talk leveling. As a melee duelist, Sunder leveling is probably the most powerful and fast option available. If you want other options, Dual Strike, Cleave, or Frostblades are also solid. I would not recommend leveling with either Reeve or Blade Flurry until you can start using Skeva at level 65. Even with amazing gear, these both feel significantly worse than Sunder. Lastly, let's talk about alternative skill choices. To date, I've killed Uber Elder with this champion with the following skills: Blade Flurry, Reeve, Lacerate, Double Strike, Ice Crash, Viper Strike, Heavy Strike, and Infernal Blow. These fall into two categories: skills you just need to change gems, and skills that require you to buy a new stat stick. Since both Heavy Strike and Infernal Blow can be used with scepters, but not daggers, you'll want to pick up a dagger stat stick for these skills. I would highly recommend using Ancestral Call for any of the name-locking single-target skills for both map clearing and bossing. Thank you very much for watching my guide. If you have any questions, I will try to handle them in the comments, or catch me live at twitch.tv/DonTheCrown. I've uploaded Uber Elder kills with several different skills, and I'm still looking to add more. Please make sure to check these out. I'll also likely add a written guide here soon to go into more detail.